Zoning map. It's showing, again, for reference, we've got Hawaii Belt Road running east-west through the slide. Access to the property is off of Kalopa Lower Road. Here is the subject parcel outlined in red, and in the dashed line is the roughly 1.65 acre permit area. Zoning for the property is agricultural 5 acres, which is similar to the much of the surrounding zoning, and some Ag 40 as indicated in blue in the upper right-hand corner. The state land use boundary designation for the subject parcel and the surrounding area is agricultural. The general plan designates the parcel and the surrounding area is important agricultural lands. South toward Hilo, I just put this picture in here because I wanted to show one of the requirements of the original permit was to plant some visual screening, and as we were driving out the other day to go visit, we passed it by because I couldn't see it, so the visual screening has worked. Here in the lower left is just photos of the portable toilet storage area, and on the right as well. So the planning director is recommending to deny the request to delete condition number 2 to remove the life of the permit. Deleting the condition would be contrary to the reasons the planning commission originally granted the special permit. Ultimately, the original permit was meant to be temporary. The PC at the time was responding post-2008 economic downturn. They didn't want to have this business close and have the employees out of jobs, so they found that this was a special situation and wanted to give an opportunity for the applicant to move to a more appropriate place. Again, they granted it with the understanding that it would be a temporary situation. The request to allow the special permit use in perpetuity would not satisfy the criteria for granting a special permit. Again, we added in your report the original recommendation from the planning director at the time. If they were to come in today with a similar special permit request, we would recommend denial for the same reasons. The planning department has consistently recommended denial for special permits on lands with the highest agricultural potential to ensure their agricultural use in perpetuity. This recommendation is consistent with that precedent. And finally, lands with the highest agricultural potential should be preserved for bona fide agriculture and should not be used to provide a cheaper alternative to more expensive industrial zone lands. We did take a quick look. Although they tend to be more expensive, there are lands available in Kona and Kauai, both industrially and commercially zoned. And another option, although it's probably not the best option, is a special permit on other agricultural lands that aren't of the highest quality soils. So there are other options for the applicant at this point. But as a compromise, the director felt it a good idea to allow the applicant some additional time to find that alternative West Hawaii location. So he's recommending amending condition number 2 so that the permit expires within 5 years of the effective date of this amended permit, which would be around 2022. Just one more thing I want to add before we move on. Page 4, second to last paragraph, 4th line down. I want to change the applicant did this by leasing industrially zoned land in Hilo to purchasing commercially zoned land in Hilo. There was just some inconsistency in my report, and I just wanted to bring that up and change it. We have removed the condition for final plan approval since they already got final plan approval. And we also removed the condition for the possibility for an administrative time extension. So should the applicant want to come back in 2022 for more time, they'd have to come back to the Planning Commission. That's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that the Commission may have.
Any questions of staff from the Commission? Thank you. Then will the representative and or the applicant please come forward? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth on this matter before the Planning Commission?
Yes.
All right, thank you. State your name and proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'm Zendo Kern. I'm the planning consultant. To my right here is John Cummings, the applicant. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, Mr. Director, Corporation Counsel, and all the wonderful staff on the Planning Department that does a lot of hard work here. This is obviously a bit of a tricky one. You're probably going to ask me if we reviewed the recommendation and conditions, which we have reviewed the recommendation and conditions. At this point, we're not comfortable with accepting them as they are. For the most part, the conditions themselves are fine, except for the time frame of it. We realized that the request came in to allow the operation to happen indefinitely. We're open to a conversation of what that would do, or potentially a longer time frame. This is a tricky situation, obviously, because of the nature of the land. If the land wasn't considered prime, it'd probably be a much different conversation we have here. I had the opportunity to sit on the Planning Commission during this original application and saw the process of what happened there and what it went through. I think something that is extremely important that I'd like everybody to consider is what this does. So this is on prime ag land, right? And we want to preserve prime ag land. And so with this operation, what we have is we have about 4 acres. Part of it is in pasture, so it's being used as agriculture. It's being used as ag. We have a home that the family lives in. The family lives there and they operate out of a portion of it as the office for their business. The applicant does not advertise on the site. There's no signs. As Christian had mentioned, they drove past it. The applicant does not have customers coming over. It's not a place where it's like, commercial operations where customers are coming over. They deal with the customers out in the field or by the phone. So traffic is pretty much none. It's just what they do. Now, if this application were to allow the applicant to construct a building, construct a warehouse, have parking, what would that do? That would destroy the ag potential of the land, right? Because all of a sudden you have a building there, you're going to rip the building down? Of course not. But this doesn't allow them to build any permanent structures. It allows them to operate out of their home and basically store the portable toilets there and store some trucks. So what does that essentially do? It preserves the ag land. If the applicant were to stop using this, they take the toilets away, they take the trucks away, what do we have? Prime ag land. So to me, on an island in the county of Hawaii, it's challenging. It's challenging to operate a business here. It's challenging to survive here. We love this place. I'm born and raised, this is my home, and we do what we have to do to survive here. And so this to me is almost an ideal situation from a certain perspective, where you have a family-based business, they operate out of their home, you have agriculture activity on over half of the land, and on 1 acre you have storage of the portable toilets and trucks. This is local family business, this is ag, and this is a family living at their home. That's Big Island. Again, if this wasn't on prime, we'd probably be having a different situation. If you look at the other parcels in the area, there's not a lot of viable ag activity going on. At the same time, if it does become viable in the future, great, the land is still preserved. It does not take away the agriculture potential of this land. I think something else to really consider is the client, the applicant, when they had the original special permit issued, they went out and they worked on finding a new location. They found one in Hilo. They're using it. They looked on the other side. There's a letter in there from Caleb Yamanaka, who is their real estate agent, broker, that was searching for it. He sent a letter to me saying that the challenges that they had. So if the applicant were able to find a suitable location in those areas, I think they'd be there. Obviously, price point, location, West Hawaii can be much more challenging than the Hilo side. So, here they are. They made the effort. They went out there. They did it. It's not like, oh, I'm not going to do anything. Come back in 10 years and ask for it again. So I think the applicant showed good intention. So my ask is, if the commission isn't comfortable with having the permit run indefinitely, what would be a reasonable time frame? Because right now, basically, the permit expires in about 2 years from now. So the recommendation as it sits now is to allow 5 years. So that's basically an additional 3 years. Would the commission consider 10 years from the date of the expiration of this? That would be reasonable in my opinion. And again, by allowing it, it does not take away the potential of the prime ag land. It allows a family operation, family business to continue to go and operate as they have been. We don't have anybody, I haven't received a call, I haven't received a letter of people that were in opposition of it from the neighbors. We sent out notices to surrounding property owners. That tells me that they're doing something right. They're still in business. Excuse me. They're doing something right. So if you have any questions for me or Mr. Cummings, be more than happy to answer those. Mr. Cummings did mention to me that one of the issues that they do face is theft from other sites. They don't have a theft issue on their property. Why? They live there. It's their home. Hilo, you've had theft issues. Is that right, Mr. Cummings?
They keep taking portables out of our property.
So, by expanding out, not to say that security can't be put in place, it's just one more further issue. So, we sit here basically pleading with the commission to look at it from the perspective of a family home-based business that has done their best, that have been working hard. They've been in business for almost 30 years. To stay in business on the Big Island for 30 years is challenging, as it is, and they've been doing that. So we're here humbly asking to have this conversation to allow additional time. No disrespect to the planning department whatsoever. We completely understand how that works. When I was on the commission and BJ was the planning director, certain things would come in for a denial, and the commission, we would actually go the other way. And when at one point we're having lunch, and I told BJ, I was like, BJ, I'm sorry, keep voting against you. And she's like, you don't need to worry about that. We, as a department, we have certain criteria that we have to follow. That's what this is right now. The planning department has certain criteria. It's prime ag land. They can't say yes to a certain extent. But the commission does have the flexibility to look at things and address them in a little bit different manner, and that's why the commission exists. So for the sake of time, because I know the clock is ticking, I will yield the floor for a minute and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Endo. Any questions? Yes, Joe.
Yes, I do have a couple of questions. Is there any financial or other reason why a time limit, say every 5 years, come back and allow us to see, or the Planning Commission to see, whether circumstances have changed in Hamakua in terms of development of ag lands? Right now, there isn't much of one. I live very near the applicant. And I'm personally not worried that there isn't enough ag land available for people to do whatever they want. But is there any financial or other reason why a periodic renewal requirement is such a problem for the applicant?
Would you like me to answer that, Mr. Cummings? Well, from a monetary standpoint, obviously there's a cost associated with it. I don't sit up here for charity, but that's less of a concern. It's more so, I think, it's the concern in the mind and in the heart of as they come along. As I spoke to, it happened by circumstance that I ended up speaking to Mrs. Cummings, John's wife, a little while back. And she had talked to me about it. I said, hey, how's it going over there? How's your special permit going? And she's like, oh, it's, we're doing good. We found the location in Hilo, but our permit's coming up for renewal. And the stress of that, I think, is the biggest issue. But at the same token, to come back isn't necessarily a problem.
Just we gotta always, it always, at the end of that 5 years, gotta come back, you know what I mean? All I heard about is my children. Get them set up. I'm not the healthiest clown in the world, but when time to go, it's time to go, and then I like make sure I die happy,
So yeah, I think it's less of a monetary issue. I mean, the monetary issue isn't really, it's more of the other side of it. But at the same time, that's what we're here for at the discussion. If the commission says, hey, we should look at this every so often, what's a reasonable time frame for that?
Okay, then thank you. The other question I have had to do with water use. I know that that the items are just stored there, but I was wondering why the fairly large amount of water use. Are you filling them up with county water before trucking them out there?
No, I have an endless pool. And I had a transplant 12 years ago. Excuse me. Well, I have an endless pool that I swim in, but I cannot use chemical. And it's like about 2,000 gallons. So every other month I gotta change the water because of my kidney. So I cannot swim in it with chemicals. So every other month I change the water. That's why I use plenty of water. My trucks fill up at the sewage treatment plants before they come back. So every day they dump and they fill up the water there and they come back.
Okay.
And I get cattle and I get like 6 troughs, 150 gallons a trough, and it's dry over there. So they gotta drink water.
It's raining this morning.
It is. Can I add to that?
Out there.
We had looked at that. That was a comment that came back from the Department of Water Supply saying, hey, the water usage is greater. So I spoke to Mrs. Cummings, and she had mentioned that Mr. Cummings has the endless pool, which is the kind of pool where there's a flow in it. So it's almost like a treadmill type pool, right? And so you said, yeah, John needs to, refill the pool every so often. So I said, this is an issue. We can't have the water usage going above what you're allowed to from the water department. So we looked at it and I said, you're gonna have either 2 options. One is to get your water reducage down so it meets that criteria, or ask for an additional water meter for additional usage, or potentially have a holding tank. Like a catchment tank that could be used for more of the agriculture activities on 10,000, 15,000 gallons, holding tank that could be filled from, typical rain catchment system that we have a lot here on the Big Island, that could be used for, the cattle and things of that nature. Obviously it wouldn't work for the pool because it needs to, county water is the cleanest. So definitely measures are in place to mitigate that. I went through it with her and I said, what's your water usage? And we looked at it, and even on some of the better months, I was like, well, you're still exceeding it. We have to do something about that. That has to change. With those 2 options, 3 options, reduction, additional water from the water department, or a catchment tank, that can be accomplished.
A few times my water line broke. Cattle, they step on them and they break them, and I don't know because we are not in. But when I find it and I fix it, but one time 2 days was running.
Any other questions? Marlon.
Chair, I have a question. I'm just going to assume that the reason you're coming in 2 years prior to the expiration is because of your health and your concern, and instead of waiting for closer to the expiration date. And for me, I like to be consistent in what we do, because whether we need to view every case and identify every case for its own merit, it does set precedents. And I'm just not comfortable with that word indefinitely. I can just see every other applicant coming back in and requesting the same, but what is reasonable? And that, and I can see 10 years. We've granted 10 years in the past. I can see 10 years from effective date of this application.
Any other questions? I have a comment too. You present a compelling argument, and I think 5 years was a compromise, and I could see another 5 years on that. 10 years would work for me too. So, thanks, Zendo. And do you have anything else?
I do realize that the word indefinite could set a precedence, and we talked about that I talked about that with the applicant at the beginning, and that's the ideal, but it makes sense that again, we don't want to set a precedence that it's not comfortable with, and I think in that range of 10 years from the date of if this gets approved is reasonable. And we can look at that. They'll still be making, efforts to find other locations, et cetera. And then if need be, we come back, as Commissioner Clarkson says, we come back and we look at it at that time. And it possibly, if that would be the case, it'd probably be a little bit early again to, save the stress of it that, who knows, you never know what's going to happen, right? I think that would be, I think that's reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a question? Thank you. You may return to your seats. We don't have anyone signed up to testify, so we could look for a motion to close public testimony.
So move.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close public testimony. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public testimony is closed. Next, we'll be looking for a discussion and a motion for action.
A question.
Yes, Thomas.
If we are to, extend, instead of 5 years, we want to extend it to 10 years, is there any big issue about that? Anybody have any big issue with that?
I personally don't have an issue because I think Zendo, explained how it's not going to change the character of that prime ag land. It's still going to be prime ag land. Anybody else? Yes, Director.
Yeah, I would chime in. No, I don't have a problem with 10 years.
Any more discussion? Then I would look for a motion.
I'll give it a shot here. I move that the application to amend special permit number 09-82 be approved, that condition number 2 be amended to 10 years, and based on the other planning director's recommendations and proposed conditions which shall be adopted.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve with an amendment on the conditions. Can we have a roll call vote?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, just for clarification, from the effective date of this amendment, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Miyasato.
Aye.
Commissioner Rafferty.
Aye.
Commissioner Clarkson.
Aye.
And Chair Hinkle.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries 4-0.
Motion carries, and you'll be notified in writing of the determination. Thank you both for coming in.
No, we don't have time, sorry.